Right, now, the main thing I want to do in this session, in the next few minutes, is talk about page 6. Because as I emphasized in the last session, the equation must be in the form y equals in order to be able to tell what the slope is. Now, one of the things that always happens on my exams, and I think probably any math teacher's exams, is, we teach you one thing, and then the next thing you know, you've got a question on the exam that looks like something else. Did you ever have that experience? Well, what if somebody gives you a problem like number 30, this would be on page 6, that says 4x plus y equals to 8. Now, what did we learn a few minutes ago in the first part of this tape? If you ever have an equation in the form y equals mx plus v, what is the y-intercept? Y-intercept equals v. In particular, it's the point 0, comma b. Okay? And the slope, m, let's see, m is the slope, right? So if the problem looks like this, you can quickly look at it and tell me the y-intercept and the slope, and you can use that to draw the graph. Isn't that wonderful? Now, somebody gives you a problem that looks like this. This doesn't look like that, does it? This doesn't say y equals. And what's the slope? Somebody's going to say, well, the slope is the coefficient of x, which is m. And the slope is the coefficient of x, which is 4 here, which is wrong. You see, you can't tell what the slope is until you get it y equals. That does not say y equals, does it? What would you have to do to get y equals? You have to get the y all by itself, and the way we want to get the y isolated on the left side is to subtract 4x from the left side of the equation. Now, if you do that, what do you have to do on the right side? Subtract 4x from the right side also, because you see, whatever we add or subtract from the left side, we must also add or subtract from the right side to keep the equation in balance. So now this subtracts out, and what's left on the left side? Y. Y is what's left on the left side. But what's left on the right side? Now this doesn't combine, does it? 8, negative 4x doesn't combine. So what could you write instead of what would you write? Just
minus 4.
8 minus 4x. Okay? You could write it 8 minus 4x. How else might you write that? Y equals negative 4x plus 8. Okay? So you could write it either this way or this way. Now, it is not until you write it in this form that you can identify what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. Now you can tell me what the y-intercept is. What's the y-intercept?
4x. No.
The y-intercept, 8. And what's the slope?
4x. No, 4.
4 over 1. Negative 4 over 1.
Negative 4 over 1. Okay? So here, let me write that down. The y-intercept is the point 8, or 0, comma 8. And the slope is negative 4, or negative 4 over 1. Okay? And now you'd be able to graph that line just like you...
Do you want us to graph it on here?
Now, did I want you to graph it on there? Really? No, I didn't. What I want you to find here is the slope of the y-intercept. And we had enough... Did you have enough practice on the other pages about how to graph a line? I think you probably did. So the point I'm trying to make here is, if you can find the if you can find the y-intercept and the slope, I think you can find you can graph the line easily enough. So I didn't even ask you to graph it in this handout. Although if you wanted to, it'd be all right. It'd be good practice for you. Okay? Now, let's take a slightly more complicated problem like number 34. Number 34, it says negative 2x plus 3y equals to 12. Now, what do I have to do before I can find the slope and the y-intercept?
Isolate one.
isolate the y. In other words, we have to solve for y. And how many y terms do you see up here? How many y's are there in this problem?
One.
Just one, right there. What do we need to get with that? We need to get that all by itself, don't we? So what would you do?
Divide.
Now wait. In order to get this term all by itself, what else is over on this side?
You'd add 2x.
A negative 2x. So what we'll need to do is add a positive 2x to both sides, right? Because we have a negative 2x, we'll have to add a positive 2x to both sides. So now what do you have for an equation?
3y
3y equals
2x
2x
plus 12.
plus 12. Good. Now, does that say y equals?
No,
It doesn't say y equals, does it?
no.
And we can't tell what the slope is until you say y equals. So we got to get y equals before you can do anything else. Now what?
Y.
What would you have to do to get y all by itself?
Divided.
The key word here is 3, the unspoken word. 3 what y? 3 times y. How do we undo times?
Divide.
Divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 3, right? And if you divide both sides by 3, then you have to divide each term, by 3. Divide each term by 3. Now what does it say? Y equals, because see this 3 divides out. Y equals what? 2x over 3. Can you write that as a fraction? Like maybe, how about 2/3? How many x is it? 2/3 x. Do you see why I'd want to write that? 2/3 x? 2/3 x. So you can see what the slope is, right? 2x over 3 or 2/3 x, and then what? Plus 4. Now, can you tell me what's the y-intercept? The y-intercept is 4, or 0, 4. And what's the slope?
2/3.
2/3. Okay? And if you wanted to, you could graph that, couldn't you? In fact, why don't we do that? Why don't we go ahead and graph that one, just to make sure we've got it right. Just to make sure we put it all together here at the end of this handout. Right, so now my slope is 2/3. Let me draw the x and the y-axis. X and the y-axis, and you'll have the point, what to start with? Where do we start to graph this? 4. Okay, so we'll have to go up 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that. And then what do we do to graph the slope? All right, we're going to rise 2, that means go up 2, and run 3. 1, 2, 3. And that will be the next point, won't it? And then draw the line between those 2 points. Is that finished? Or does that look good to you? I think it needs more, don't you? It needs to go more in that direction with an arrow. It needs to go more in this direction with an arrow, right? Okay? Now, that's one way to graph this problem. But I want to show you an easier way to graph this problem. There's an easier way. If the problem says y equals, then there's no better way to graph the line than to find the y-intercept and the slope. But if you'll turn to page 251 in the one-step book, this is the 3rd edition of the Basic Algebra one-step, page 251, and I'm going to continue with this as my example. I'm going to show you an easier way to graph this that you won't have to go through all this trouble. Now, if you like doing it this way, you can keep on doing it this way. This will most always work. I think there might be a couple of cases where it doesn't work by this method. But you can most always do the problem by this method. But there is an easier way. Let me show